I've never really talked about this before, not to anyone close. Not even when people asked why I don't visit family on holidays. The truth never fits neatly into small talk. It's ugly, complicated, and even now, years later, I still feel my stomach tighten when I think about it. But writing helps. And maybe someone somewhere will read this and realize they're not crazy for wanting more than survival. I grew up in an orphanage that smelled of bleach and boiled cabbage. The walls were painted a tired yellow, the color of hopeless cheer, and everything echoed footsteps, laughter, crying. We were lined up for meals, for baths, for bed, and for inspection. I learned quickly that smiling made adults like you and silence kept you safe. When you're small and unwanted, you become an expert in staying out of trouble. The day the Thompsons came, the headmistress straightened my collar 3 times. "Behave," she whispered. They looked perfect, Robert with his pressed suit and confident handshake. Susan with a smile too bright to be real. They said they wanted a boy who was smart and polite. I was both, at least on the surface. They took me to the zoo that day. I remember penguins wobbling behind glass, Robert's expensive camera, Susan's perfume like sweet alcohol. When she bent down to wipe ice cream from my chin, I thought, this is what a mother must smell like. They told me they'd come back. I didn't believe them, because people always said that. But 3 weeks later, they did. Papers were signed, a social worker hugged me, and suddenly I was Nathan Thompson. At first, it was everything I'd dreamed about. Pancakes on Sundays, my own bed, toys that didn't belong to 50 other kids. They said we're a family now, and I tried to believe it. I called them Mom and Dad because they asked me to. For a few weeks, it almost felt true. Then, little by little, the air changed. It started small. I wasn't allowed to touch the white sofa. I had to ask before eating. Robert corrected my posture at dinner, pressing my shoulders until my spine ached. If I made noise while he watched TV, I'd get the look. The first time Susan slapped me was for spilling milk. She froze after, hand trembling, but she didn't say sorry. She said, "You need to learn." The next few years were lessons. Rules for everything. Walk quietly. Don't speak unless spoken to. Keep your shoes polished. Be grateful. And if I failed any rule, Robert handled the punishment. Sometimes with words, sometimes with the belt, sometimes by locking the pantry so I'd skip meals. I learned not to cry. Tears made them angrier. At school I wore long sleeves, even in spring. Teachers thought I was shy. Maybe I was. But I got good grades straight as. Books became my escape, my rebellion. I'd lie on my stomach reading until Susan yanked the light cord and told me to stop wasting electricity. I started keeping a small notebook under my pillow where I wrote everything I couldn't say. On the first page, I scrawled, Rule 1, survive. By 10 I knew what kind of day it would be by the sound of Robert's footsteps. Heavy meant angry. Quick meant something at work went wrong. On those days I tried to vanish, hide in the backyard, the attic, anywhere quiet. I still remember sitting behind the water heater, counting heartbeats and dust particles, waiting for the storm to pass. When I was 12, I joined the debate club. I'd stay late, claiming we had practice, just to delay going home. My teacher, Ms. Lawson, said I had a gift for arguing. "You'd make a good lawyer," she told me once. The word hit me like electricity. Lawyer, someone who uses words as armor. I started reading about trials, justice, the Constitution. The idea that rules could protect, not punish, seemed impossible but beautiful. Susan hated when I stayed late. She'd say, "You think you're better than us because you read books." Robert said, "You'll end up just like your real parents." Nothing. I never knew who my real parents were, but I knew I didn't want to end up like the Thompsons. When I turned 16, they forgot my birthday. The next week, Ms. Lawson slipped a cupcake into my locker with one candle and a note. Keep fighting. I cried in the bathroom and swore I'd get out. That night I added Rule 2, leave. At 18 I packed a backpack, 2 shirts, jeans, a toothbrush, my notebook, and a copy of my high school diploma. They were in the living room arguing about money when I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I wanted silence to be my goodbye. Freedom didn't feel how I expected. It was loud, messy, hungry. I rented a tiny apartment that smelled like cigarettes from whoever lived there before. I worked shelving books at the library during the day and studied community college courses at night. Sometimes dinner was instant noodles split over 2 days. Sometimes I skipped heat to afford textbooks. But no one yelled, no one hit me, and I could breathe. That was enough. College turned into university. University turned into law school after a scholarship and 100 forms. I didn't have time for friends. Every hour had to count. There was a professor named Kleinbald, sharp, relentless, who said on the first day, "Law is a sword and a shield. Decide which you need more." I needed both. Law school was brutal. Everyone came from money or legacy. I came from scars and ramen. But pain had given me discipline. While others partied, I memorized case law. I spent nights in the library until the janitor flicked the lights. Each exam I passed felt like punching a hole in my past. I worked at a legal aid clinic my last year. We helped tenants facing eviction. I saw families crying in cramped offices, children clutching stuffed animals while their parents begged for extensions. I learned to stay calm when others panicked, to speak softly but carry evidence like a weapon. Every victory was small but real. For the first time, I felt like I was rewriting my own story. When I graduated, I didn't throw a party. I bought myself a cheap pen, silver with my initials engraved, and wrote in my old notebook, Rule 3, become someone they can't hurt. I passed the bar at 28. My first office was a rented corner above a laundromat. The walls were peeling, the window faced a brick wall, and the radiator hissed like it had opinions. I didn't care. I hung a crooked sign that said, Nathan Avery, attorney at law. Clients trickled in, mostly low-income tenants, small disputes, unpaid wages. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. I could look someone in the eye and say, I can help, and actually mean it. I stopped thinking about the Thompsons. They were ghosts, no phone calls, no letters. I told myself I didn't need closure. I had a purpose, and purpose was enough. Until the day their names showed up on a manila folder on my desk. Carla, my assistant, leaned against the doorframe. Walk-ins, she said. Eviction case. Robert and Susan Thompson. She didn't notice my hands freeze. They say they're desperate. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. I hadn't heard their names aloud in a decade. They're outside, she added. Should I tell them to come in? My first instinct was no. Let them drown in whatever hole they dug. But something heavier whispered yes. Maybe curiosity. Maybe karma. Send them in. When the door opened, time stuttered. They looked smaller, faded. Robert's once rigid posture slumped under a cheap jacket. Susan's hair was silver now, her face etched with lines that no cream could erase. They didn't recognize me. Not right away, Mr. Avery. Robert asked, voice trembling around the edges. We heard you help people facing eviction. Yes, I said evenly. Please, sit. They told me everything. Robert's investments had collapsed. Susan's charity lost donors. They'd sold their house, moved into an apartment, fallen behind on rent. The landlord wanted them out. As they spoke, I took notes like a professional, dates, amounts, notices. My pen didn't shake, but my heart did. When they finished, silence filled the room. I closed the folder and leaned back. You know, I said slowly, you once told me no one helps you unless there's something in it for them. Robert frowned. Susan blinked. It took a few seconds. Then she gasped softly. Nathan. I met her eyes and nodded. Her hand flew to her mouth. Tears welled instantly. Robert's face went blank, pale. The room smelled faintly of fear and old perfume. "I'm sorry," Susan whispered. "We were young. We didn't know how to handle, how to love." I asked quietly. "How to feed a child? How to stop hitting when you were angry?" She sobbed. Robert stared at the floor. For a long moment, no one spoke. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall like a gavel. "You can walk out now," I said finally. "Find another lawyer. Or I can take your case. But not because you deserve it, because I do." Neither moved. Susan just nodded through tears. "Please," she said. "Help us." They came back the next day with a box of papers, rent notices, letters from their landlord, bank statements with red numbers like open wounds. I read through everything in silence while they sat across from me. The whole time, I could feel them trying not to look at me too long. It was strange when I was a kid. Their gaze could freeze me now. It was them who seemed afraid of being seen. I told them the truth. The landlord had violated multiple housing codes, hadn't done repairs in months, and was trying to bully them into leaving. It was the kind of case I took all the time. What made it hard was keeping my voice steady. My brain could switch into lawyer mode, calm and logical, but my body remembered too much. The smell of Susan's perfume, the way Robert's jaw tightened when he thought he was losing control. I kept reminding myself that I wasn't that boy anymore. I wasn't trapped in their house. They were sitting in my office, asking me for help. We filed motions, requested maintenance records, collected photos of leaks and mold. In court, I was precise, polite, ruthless. The landlord's attorney came in with swagger and left sweating. The judge granted us an injunction, then a stay, and eventually a settlement that let Robert and Susan keep their apartment at a fair rate. When the ruling was read, Susan covered her face and cried. Robert tried to thank me. I told him not to. I said, "Use this time to fix what you can. Don't waste it like before." He nodded, eyes wet, and for the first time in my life, I saw him small, not dangerous, not powerful, just old and scared. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark and asked myself why I'd helped them. Maybe I wanted to prove I was better than they were. Maybe I needed to see that kindness could survive even after everything. Maybe I just wanted to finish the story that had haunted me since I was 7. Whatever the reason, I felt lighter afterward. Not happy, just lighter, like something had been put down at last. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name in shaky handwriting. Inside was a note from Susan. She wrote that she didn't expect forgiveness, that she and Robert had been wrong in ways they couldn't justify, and that she hoped I would believe I was always worth loving. She ended it with, "Thank you for saving us even when we didn't save you." I folded it, put it inside my old notebook from the orphanage. Between the pages were I'd written Rule 1, survive, and Rule 2, leave. I didn't reply. Some things don't need answers. Months passed. Work went on. I kept taking the same kinds of cases, small victories that meant the world to people no one listened to. But I started thinking more about the kids who'd never get a chance to fight. The ones sitting in group homes counting the days until 18 like I once did. One Saturday I drove back to the town where my orphanage had been. The building was gone, replaced by condos. A new home stood a few blocks away, different name, same mission. I went inside. The director was a woman about my age. When I told her I'd grown up in the system, her eyes softened. I asked what the kids needed most. She said, time, stability, people who don't quit. Then she laughed and added, and a computer lab that actually works. I told her I could help with that. Over the next few months, I donated books, computers, furniture. We turned an empty room into a small study space with shelves of law books and guides for college applications. I started coming on weekends to teach the teens about their rights, how to understand leases, jobs, contracts. I told them knowledge is armor. They listened in the way only kids have been ignored know how to listen. On the wall above the door, I hung a plaque that said, "Strength isn't what you do to others, it's what you choose not to repeat." Every time I saw it, I thought of Robert's belt, Susan's cold silences, and how I had broken the chain without even realizing it. About a year later, the past knocked again. A hospital called. Robert had died of a heart attack. Susan wanted to see me. I almost said no, but curiosity or maybe compassion won. When I walked into her room, she looked nothing like the woman I remembered. Her hair was thin, her skin paper pale, but her eyes were clear. She smiled when she saw me. "You came," she said softly. "I did. I wanted to tell you you turned out good," she whispered. "Better than we ever deserved." I didn't answer. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, feeling time bend around us. She reached out a trembling hand, and I let her hold mine. "I know it doesn't fix anything," she said, "but we left something for you. Not money or deed. The old house. It's yours now." I didn't know what to say. That house was the stage for every nightmare I ever had. The idea of owning it felt obscene. She squeezed my hand weakly. "Maybe you'll know what to do with it." 2 weeks later, she was gone. The lawyer handling her estate confirmed the deed was in my name. I drove out there on a grey afternoon, half dreading what I'd find. The driveway was cracked, weeds pushing through the concrete. The white paint had peeled to dull yellow. Inside, the air was musty but quiet. No shouting, no footsteps, no ghosts except the ones in my head. I walked from room to room. The kitchen where I'd spilled the milk. The hallway where I used to flinch at every sound. My old bedroom, smaller than I remembered, the closet door still squeaking on its hinges. I stood there a long time. Then I opened the window. The air was cold and clean. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a trap. It just felt like history. I knew what to do with it. I called the foster program the next morning and donated the property to them. I said, "Make it a home for kids who need one. A real home." They renovated it, repainted, added new beds and a playground out back. Now it's full of laughter and noise, the kind I used to envy. Sometimes I drive past at night and see the lights on, shadows moving behind curtains. A glow of life where there used to be fear. It doesn't erase anything, but it fills the space differently. People think forgiveness is some grand gesture. For me, it's quieter. It's not inviting monsters back in, it's making sure they don't live rent-free in your head anymore. I never forgave Robert and Susan out loud, but I stopped wishing them pain. I stopped replaying every slap, every cruel word. I built something instead. That's enough. The notebook still sits in my desk drawer. The pages are yellowed, edges frayed. On the last page, I wrote a new rule. Rule 3, forgive just enough to move forward, but never enough to forget why you had to. When life feels heavy, I flip through it and remember that little boy who counted heartbeats behind a water heater and promised himself he'd get out. He did. Sometimes clients thank me after a case and call me Mr. Avery like it's a title of honor. I smile and think about the orphanage kids, about the house that isn't a prison anymore, about Susan's letter and how her handwriting shook. I think about Ms. Lawson's cupcake, about Professor Klein telling me to burn the right things, and about how healing is never neat, it's a fight that happens quietly, every day, until one morning you realize the noise in your head has faded. I still have nightmares sometimes. In them, back in that house, smaller, helpless, waiting for footsteps. But even there, in that dark version of memory, I can feel something different now. A door open somewhere, air moving. A reminder that I made it out, and I built a life that looks nothing like theirs. That's all I ever wanted. Not revenge, not pity, just peace. and the proof that hurt doesn't have to pass itself on. And when I drive past that old house and hear laughter spilling through its windows, I think maybe that's what justice really sounds like. After everything I went through, I still wonder, if you were in my place, would you have done the same?